You are now listening to
Chakras and Shotguns.
Welcome back to Chakras and Shotguns. This is episode 32. I'm Mik.
I'm Jenn. Welcome back.
What's up? How you doing?
You know, I'm doing okay. It's a little colder than... I guess I'm always surprised when it's cold in Texas, but like we should have real seasons. So it's a little chilly and the house is a little chilly. I'm actually, while we're recording, I decided to throw on a little faux fur vest since I don't go anywhere in the panorama and I haven't worn it all season. So,
Okay. You feeling good about that?
trying to feel a little cozy in here as I record with my boo.
Yeah, I'm glad our gas is back on, given the recent cold spell we're experiencing.
Ooh, yeah.
That was a bit of a trial.
I actually lied a little bit. We did get out the other weekend. Took a very quick trip to Joshua Tree.
That's a lot of trips this month.
I know, and we're about to sit our asses down. It was a very quick trip. We flew into Palm Springs. There's a direct from Dallas. And it was a very easy drive into Joshua Tree. The scenery was gorgeous, both going in and coming out. So it was a really good trip. Just me and my boo.
Yeah, I had a good time. Stayed at a cool little Airbnb out there, and just really enjoyed being out in the desert, even though it was cold out there. But we enjoyed it. I hadn't been out there before, so got to take in that scenery, which was different.
Cute little cafes and Joshua Tree coffee. OMG. The espresso. I mean, like, I'm already sad about when I get to the bottom of that bag of espresso that we bought. It's so good. It's so good. So, yeah, I definitely want to spend more time out there. We got plans for Joshua Tree. We plotting on Joshua Tree.
Yes, indeed.
What else?
Yeah, one thing I wanted to talk about was a new business that I have launched. So I've talked a little bit about my journey with Reiki on the podcast and how I have over time really, I guess, built my self-confidence up when it comes to healing and utilizing that gift. And I've gotten a lot of great feedback from people who have received Reiki treatments from me. And so I was like, okay, well, let me open myself up, put myself out there, and really kind of focus on trying to deliver this to more people in a bigger way. So my website is called theinnervictory.com. And I offer Reiki and a little bit of business coaching. So it mirrors kind of my love of Reiki as well as utilizing some of the skills I built in my professional career to help folks business-wise as well.
So excited for Mik. This is amazing. You're killing it. Website's dope.
Thanks, boo.
So, yeah, go check that out. We'll put a link in the show notes, too, so you can see that.
All right. Are you ready to do some breath work?
My vest and I are ready.
Take it away.
So I think part of some of the things I've been reflecting on lately have been this pressure that we can feel from society, from our parents, even within ourselves, from our job, of continuing to do more. Yes, I got through this, and this, but I could have done this, and this. And I think we'll nickel and dime our free time away sometimes and even punish ourselves for taking a moment for ourselves and saying, instead of like just sitting down and kind of watching TV or being on my phone, I should have been doing this for this person. I should have been doing this for the kids, my husband, my wife, my job, and on and on and on and on and on. So this breath work is encouraging us to be still. We're always talking about not worrying about the past, not fretting about the future, and being present in the moment. And so this one will be a little bit more quiet, a little bit more still, really working on quieting down our mind, not thinking about the next thing on the to-do list, and really just resonating with the moment. So find a comfortable seat. Let's close your eyes and let's begin. We're going to take 3 deep cleansing breaths together. Inhale through your nose, expanding your belly. Sigh that out through your mouth. Let's do that again. Inhale in through your nose, visualizing that energy coming from your root to your sacral, up through your solar plexus, to your heart, to your throat, to your third eye, up to your crown. Hold it there. Sigh it out through your mouth. Last one, we're going to do that again. Inhale in through your nose, feeling that energy going through each chakra. And sigh that out through your nose. Now that we're aware of our breath, I want you to set an intention of being still. That's physically, mentally, emotionally, of just finding stillness. And I want you to focus on that intention for the remainder of our breath work. Feel free to use this as a meditation practice in the future of just being able to be still, using your intention almost as a mantra, and being a little bit more mindful of the present. But since we have a lot to talk about, let's get back into the show.
Thanks so much, Jen. Let's get into our main topic now. We are continuing our series on human design, and today we're diving a little bit deeper into the system, and we'll specifically talk about the energy centers. If you haven't listened yet to episode 31, go back and check that one out. We're going to be building off the concepts that we discussed in that episode.
And if you want to run your birth chart, you can do that for free on either geneticmatrix.com or mybodygraph.com. Remember that you do need your birth date and as precise of a birth time as possible to get the most accurate human design chart.
Yes. Last episode, we mentioned that human design incorporates the I Ching, the Tree of Life, quantum mechanics, biochemistry, astrology, and even the chakra system. We want to dig more into how the chakras are used within human design. They're referred to in human design as energy centers.
If you've been listening to the podcast, we talk about the chakras often: root, sacral, solar plexus, heart, throat, third eye, and crown. I mean, I threw them in the breathwork as well. If you're keeping count, though, the chakras that we talk about, there's 7. So those are the ones that we frequently discuss. In human design, however, there are 9 energy centers. And instead of going from the bottom up, This system actually goes from the top down. So it's crown, mind or ajna is what it's called, throat, the self energy center, or sometimes referred to as the G center, heart or ego center, sacral, emotions, sometimes also referred to as the solar plexus, the spleen, and the root. Basically, the two new centers are the G center and the spleen. And remember, if you're thinking, okay, so what is the truth? Are there 7? Are there 9? Are there 50 lim? In some systems, in some traditions, there are as many as 114 chakras. And I think, Mik, you refer to it as like a map with a highway, or which highways you want to focus on?
Yeah, so I think the analogy I used was like thinking of the 7, or in this case, the 9 chakras that we focus on as being like the major interstates on a map, right? There's tons of side streets and intersections where energy is intersecting in the body, but the main kind of thoroughfares are those big energy centers that we talk about the most.
I think I wanted to insert a joke about like that old song, Life is a Highway, but I don't think you knew that song.
Are we just going to continue this like running joke of how Mik doesn't know white music?
Life is a highway. You don't know that song?
Absolutely not.
You know, I don't know the lyrics, but that's
So
I never know the lyrics.
Both don't know the song, is what you're saying.
At least I got the first part of the chorus.
All right, moving on. If you're looking at your human design chart, you'll see 9 shapes that have lines connecting those different shapes. And so those 9 shapes are the energy centers, and the lines that connect them are called channels. For right now, we're not going to get too much into channels because they can get really complicated. So we're just going to focus on those main 9 shapes. The shapes and lines can either be white or colored in. If they're colored in, they are what's called defined. Having something be defined means that it is a constant part of you. It's fixed. If the shape or the line is white, that's referred to as being undefined. That area doesn't have consistent energy, so it's flexible, it's malleable. If you're a reflector, your entire chart is undefined. It's white. Remember, reflectors are energetic mirrors for others around them. They have an entirely flexible design that allows them to mirror back energy to others.
Because our undefined centers are flexible, that means we can be subject to conditioning in those areas. So being around someone with a defined center, when you have that same center undefined, that could find you taking on some of their characteristics when you're around them. If you're not a reflector, but you have some areas on your chart that are undefined, that doesn't mean that you're just a puppet, that this person has like this huge influence over you. And it also doesn't mean that you don't have a personality or like certain attributes, like you're just like, we're going to get into the identity center, for instance. It doesn't mean that if you're undefined, you don't have an identity. It can actually mean that you're more empathetic to others in those areas, because if you strip away the conditioning, you're actually more objective and you can have this bird's eye view almost of understanding what this person is actually experiencing in their body. Like you feel what they feel, but it's not your emotion. So you almost have a better understanding of it coming from the sidelines. The work that you should take on is recognizing when you are under the influence of other people and their definitions or their conditioning. So that helps you identify what's not yours so you can better be an observer.
Cool. Yeah, I think that gives us a good idea of what, defined and undefined means. Let's go through each of the 9 centers and we can talk about the characteristics of those centers and what defined versus undefined looks like with regard to those.
All right.
So starting at the top on your human design chart, hopefully you have it up in front of you, the top shape is a triangle, and that is the crown, which is the center of inspiration. This is the center from which truth and doubt and different types of possibilities can emerge. If your crown is defined, you have thoughts and ideas rattling around in your head all of the time. People can be amazed at how your brain works, but you can also feel mentally exhausted. Your brain is always go, 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 go. If your crown is undefined, though, you still get inspired, but your inspirations pop into your head at really odd times. You may see something in a movie that sparks something else completely unrelated to the movie. Remember, being undefined means you're taking on the conditioning of others. What you want to look out for here is running off with someone else's idea or pondering about someone else's problems. Being able to look at inspiration objectively ultimately gets you to a place of wisdom.
So I have an undefined crown, and I think how it shows up for me is I can struggle with doubt when I get inspired to do something by marrying maybe concepts that others may have come up with, or something I might see, like inspiration I put on my Pinterest board, but I might think of it in a different way, or I'm like, oh, I'll take a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of this. And I'll feel almost fraudulent sometimes, like I'm just like copying everything. But if I really took a step back and thought about it, I'm actually taking a little bit of something from a lot of different places and putting them together, and how that ends up the final product is completely my own. So I think sometimes you'll get into your head and say, or I said, get into your crown, I guess. Get into your crown and say like, oh, if it was this easy, more people should do this. It must be a trap, or I must be fraudulent, or I must just be like copying everybody else. But that's how you're inspired. It's not that you are incapable of an original thought. I think we're discounting that your thought is original despite it being inspired by something else.
Absolutely. I took a class in grad school and we talked about creativity. And what you basically described is how most all great business ideas have come about. Someone taking something from something else and mixing it with something else and creating a whole new concept. So, I mean, it's the foundation of human knowledge. Like, we continue to build on what other people have already thought about or discovered. I also have an undefined crown. And the way I think about it is we're really good at filtering through the noise and getting to the essence of an idea. And we can then take that essence and combine it with other things. Mm. So I think about it like it's mental alchemy almost.
Ooh.
You like that?
Mm-hmm.
I'll say it again later for you.
Oh my gosh.
I also, I think about this story that Jen told me from her college days. There was this dude that would basically take the cheapest vodka that comes in the plastic containers. Like
McCormick vodka, y'all, shout out.
So there's McCormick. There's also Popov, which comes in that plastic container. And he would basically run it through a Brita filter a bunch of times to make it smoother. And so I thought that was genius, first off. He must have had an open crown. But I think about like how people with these undefined crowns can basically distill this rough or complex idea and make them more refined. So we're like him with the Brita filter.
I like what you did there.
Yeah.
I like what you did there. Jen's story time with a ratchet recap by Mik. I like it. I like it a lot.
I distilled your longer story down.
Wow. Because my stories are too long?
I mean.
Wow. Tell that to the listeners. They love my stories.
Okay.
Do they?
The edited ones that I put on there.
Wow.
I love you though.
Oh, the betrayal. So one thing I definitely want to bring up as we're going through each of these centers and we're talking about defined and undefined, and Mik and I will chime in as to what's on our charts, but also be thinking about it as I think there's an inclination. I definitely have this inclination when I listen to things like this on topics like these. I'm like, get to mine. Get to what I am. So I'm undefined crown, like, okay, speed it up. but also be thinking about how it all works together for the collectives. Like that's really the essence of human design is, yes, we all have these very individual complex charts, but they're all working together for the collective. So the Defined Crown has this original thought, this inspiration that's just like gorgeous and beautiful, and nobody has ever thought of anything like it, and nothing like it has ever been thought of before. The Undefined Crowns continue to improve upon those ideas. Like, so it continues to help us evolve. Like we have this machine of original thoughts. We also have this machine of people who are distilling and evolving things that have been seen before. So it's like this constant, beautiful collection of creation in different ways, which I thought was like really beautiful.
Yeah, no, I think it's awesome. I think about like ants. And so like in a ant colony, there's the queen and their like workers and there's drones and everyone has like a specific job. And it's very simple. Like we can like understand it very easily as humans, but as more complex and evolved beings, right? Our jobs, quote unquote, aren't as easily recognizable as you would see in a, observing an ant colony. But this system kind of shows us how interconnectedly each of our jobs can ultimately contribute to the health of our society.
I love it.
Yeah.
Moving on to the Mind Center, which is also referred to as Ajna, Ajna. It's directly below your crown. It's an upside down triangle on your chart. So this center is about thinking, and worry can pop up in this center as well. Because, I mean, what is worrying if it's just not thinking about what could happen? This is where you work things out, like mentally, like just turn things over in your mind. So those with a defined mind center are always puzzling their way through things, examining them at every angle. They can also be nitpickers as they sort through each and every detail. Meditation is good for everybody. We love meditation, but it's especially great for those with a defined mind. So I have a defined mind. And when I was preparing for this episode, I was thinking about this example of there was a woman that I worked with, and she was kind of going through some things, and she would talk to me about it, like some things that were going on in her personal life. And I would take all of that home and I would just like turn it over and over and over and over again in my head over the weekend. And Mik was like, what is wrong? And I was like, I'm trying to think through her problem and how I can like maybe help her. And then I would go to work on Monday and she would just be like, hey girl, like nothing's wrong. And I spent all this time thinking through this. Like Mik is shaking his head because I think he had forgotten about this.
No, I remember this.
And I was like, I spent all this time trying to think through her issue, and I get to work and she's just like, oh, that's not a big deal. And for whatever reason, I think she just really wanted someone to hear her out. But I think that that's a prime example of how a defined mind can overthink and has to be really, really careful about that. For those with an undefined mind, you're very open-minded, which is great, but you can also be a little bit absent-minded. And I think that's because people with a defined mind can get way too in the details. They can get in the weeds, right? People with an open mind or an undefined mind can see the larger picture, but like maybe miss some of the details. They can feel that others are trying to condition them to be like, where's your attention to detail? You got to do this and you got to do that and make sure you're finishing everything out. And so they may feel some pressure there. However, if you really allow those with an undefined mind to really flourish, they're the ones that can really see the big picture. So like they're very important. Like, again, we're working together, right? So you can see the big picture. You have people who can get to the details, and then we have a fully fleshed out project or idea, etc.
Next up, the throat center. It's the square directly below the mind center on your chart. The throat center is where expression and manifestation lives. If this center is defined, you express yourself with confidence, and expressing yourself can often lead to things. What you express well also depends on what other centers are connected to your throat. You can see what is connected to your throat by looking at the colored lines called channels and see which ones those lines are touching the throat square and what other centers they're also touching.
So my throat is defined and it's connected to my defined mind. So I express what's on my mind, what I'm thinking. Sometimes it's out of the blue. Sometimes it's completely out of context. Mik deals with that often, where I just like pick up a thought out loud. Like I'm in the middle of thinking through some things and I was like, did you see the spaghetti? And he'll be like, what? So it comes out with confidence, however. Like I can very easily express what I'm thinking. Feeling is a little bit different. That's seen on my chart. My throat is not connected to my emotion center. But what I'm thinking, it'll just come out.
Yeah, if your throat center is undefined, you may struggle with expressing yourself consistently or in the way that you'd like. But when you're around certain people, they can't get you to stop talking. Most likely, that person that you're around has a defined throat and you're picking up on that energy. Basically, how you express yourself depends on who you're interacting with.
Right below the throat center is the self or G center or identity center. It's shaped like a diamond. This center governs your sense of purpose. It can also relate to boundaries and self-love. If your G center, which is what I like to call it, if your G center is defined, you know who you are and you know where you're going. So you're seeking to not just be yourself, but to be your best self. And going back to the throat for a second, both Mik and I have defined G centers, but Mik's is connected to his throat. And I've always been in awe of how he out loud declares who he is. Like, it's very like, no, this is who I am. I don't like that. I do this. I don't do that. Now, sometimes that can be frustrating because defined G centers, remember, they're fixed. It can be a little bit immovable, which was, what we probably spent our first couple of years navigating was our defined G centers and how I would think that would lend us to be on the stubborn side.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how human design is connected to other systems. So we talked about how astrology is incorporated into the human design system. And what I find fascinating is in my birth chart reading that I had with Pooja, we talked about how I have my sun, which is your sun is the reflection of who you are. And my Chiron and my North Node all are in my first house. So if that doesn't make any sense to you guys, go back and listen to those astrology episodes. But in layman's terms, basically that means I'm here to be who I am and show others how to heal by embracing being themselves. So me being out loud, as my wife says, it's all a part of my life's purpose, even though it annoyed her early in our marriage.
Early?
Oh, you still annoyed by it? Excuse me.
I'm just kidding. If I can be mushy for a moment, I would say I hadn't really thought about that in connection with your astrology reading. But I do think that in how long have we been married? 6 years? That you have helped me, like, I think that's been part of my own work. But watching you and your very, like, crystal clear boundaries and saying, like, this is who I am, I think it has helped me better embrace, like, authentically living my personality and not changing it for anybody else or to please anybody else or make anybody else comfortable, which is a burden that many people of color and many women and women of color have to deal with, especially in corporate America. So, yes, you have helped me also live out loud, boo. So thank you. You're an inspiration.
Thank you.
If your G center is undefined, remember, that does not mean that you don't have an identity, but rather that you're somewhat of a social chameleon. So you can wear many hats. Your direction can seem all over the place because you can just go with the flow, live in the moment. If you do need some structure, you can selectively choose. I don't even know if you would call it conditioning, but like who to model yourself after. So pick some empowering role models to model yourself after. If you're looking for a little bit more structure, like if you want to pursue a certain career or be a certain type of romantic partner, that would be probably a really good thing for you to do. When I was putting this together for the episode, I immediately thought of Brad Pitt. And I was like, I got to go find Brad Pitt's human design chart. Because if y'all remember, he used to be with Gwyneth Paltrow, then Jennifer Aniston, and then Angelina Jolie. And each time he was with each person, he started looking like them. Like, I think his hair was like very blonde when he was with Gwyneth Paltrow. He kind of grew his hair out kind of shaggy when he was with Jennifer Aniston. So they almost had the same haircut. And then I think he started wearing a lot more dark colors and kind of matching Angelina Jolie's like kind of emo gothy vibe. So that is a prime example of someone mirroring back what they're getting from someone else, that their identity, he's this chameleon, like he can become other people. We were also talking about this. It's really interesting that you see this example with him as a man because, you know, I think they always trying to attribute that to women. Like, oh, you change who you are every time you get a new boo. So that was cool. Another example of someone with an open G center, Britney Spears. And so thinking about her conservatorship case, when I initially heard about like how abusive, allegedly, this conservatorship was, I thought that this was all about money. But, and it's probably subconscious too. Subconsciously, she may have been surrounded by people with defined G centers who did not understand how she lived her life and her personality and how she was kind of go with the flow. And they wanted to control that. And, you know, under the auspices of like, we're helping you and we're like giving you more structure. And like, that's, you know, that could have been that influence of how that came to be.
Yeah, they were probably just trying to go for brand consistency. Like they created this brand of who she was supposed to be as this pop star.
Yeah.
And she was changing as her, you know, human design would have dictated. And they're like, nah, you got to fit back in this box because we created this brand and this brand is very valuable.
Yeah. Back then, that was not allowed. Like being different or like it was kind of like, these are the bullet points. This is what you're supposed to hit. Boom, boom, boom. That's it. Yeah.
All right, moving on. Below and a little to the right of the G center is a triangle, and that represents the heart, or it's also called the ego center. This is the center of willpower and wishes. Money matters go through the heart as well. If your heart is defined, which is statistically rare, it means you have the power to move mountains. Your willpower is super strong, and you have the drive to accomplish whatever it is that you want. But you really have to ask yourself, what is really worth your time and energy? Your heart really has to be in it. Competition can also be present in this center. This is where the ego part comes in. And those with an undefined heart can find themselves driving to do more work and drive themselves harder and harder and end up beating themselves up if they don't win. Try not to get caught up in the rat race. I know here in America, our society often assigns value to how productive we are. This is a trap, especially for people with an undefined heart. Know that you have nothing to prove. Being undefined allows you to be a mirror that you can use to help guide others find out what they really want to do in life.
I love that. I am one of the statistically rare defined heart people. So reading that, not only did that kind of light a fire under my ass for some things that I'm trying to do, it's kind of like, well, I can move mountains. I'm powerful. Let's get it done. It's going to get accomplished. It also gave me a little bit of perspective in times where I felt torn work-wise about something, because I think sometimes I would get the feedback. It's like, well, you're doing really well and you're really successful. Like, I don't understand why you don't like this or why you want to move on from this. And it's like, well, there it is. It's like, I was gonna do it, but is it a good use of my time and energy? Because my heart's not in it. So this is like what I just love about human design. It's just like, it's so freeing, because I could have gotten caught up in the thought process of like, no, but I should really do this and stick with it because I'm good at it. Or I can make sure that my heart's in on something, which really utilizes my time and energy well. And then I feel like the success will be even better.
Yeah, so I've done some research on undefined hearts. I'm an undefined heart. And one of the things that shows up is undefined people have a hard time figuring out how to value their work. And so I think I've mentioned this before. I started my own marketing consulting business last year with my business partner, and he also has an undefined heart. And one of the things we struggled with was figuring out how much to charge for our services. And I think we're still kind of like trying to refine it and really get it to the right place that like really captures the value that we're providing to our clients. It's taking some time, and it's just something that I think shows up in the undefined heart folks. So my message to undefined heart people is, don't overachieve and then undervalue the services that you're providing. I think even with this new Reiki business that I have started, that I mentioned at the top of the show, the biggest feedback I got from my mentors was that my prices were too low. So I'm still trying to figure out how to overcome some of that conditioning that appears in that heart center.
Yeah. Going back to the center of your chart, we're going to look for a square below the G center. And this is the Sacral Center. So it's a square. There should be two squares, but it's the top one. It can also be a circle, actually. Sorry. Depending on the service that you're using, depending on where you got your free chart from. So the Sacral Center governs life force. It's raw energy. And this center also, governs your sexual drive. About 70% of the population have a defined sacral center. They embody this go, go, go energy. And this is for the generators and manifesting generators. Only generators and MGs, as they're nicknamed, can have a sacral center defined. You are a powerhouse in your own right. And once you're committed to something and you unleash this sacral energy, you're nonstop until it's completed. So if you find yourself not feeling powerful, very similar to the heart and ego center, if you find yourself not feeling powerful, it's probably because you're devoting this sacral energy to things that you don't want to do. And if you remember on our last episode, we talked about that hell yeah, hell no response, and we'll get into that on another episode. But that response, if something is like, your initial reaction is like, and you're not super excited about it, but you put your sacral energy behind it anyway, you're going to feel depleted. You're not going to gain energy from it. You're not going to feel satisfied, which is the theme when you're in alignment for generators and manifesting generators. You're going to feel frustrated. So trying to be more careful about what you're really throwing this energy behind will be really, really good for you. Those with a defined sacral center can also find sex to be a defining force. However, if they're not making the right connections with their partners, like they're not feeling in their gut that this is somebody they should get with, then they can experience frustration again. So it's, same concept. Look, I'm not trying to be like puritanical and be like, soul ties, or I'm not getting into any of that. I'm just saying, listen to your body and your instincts about who you're having sex with. And if it's all systems go, you feeling good, you like, hell yeah, then it's probably going to be a really great time. Moving on to those with the undefined sacral center. So you don't have that regenerating source of energy in your design. So you can't consistently live life in the fast lane. You will burn out if you try. I do this over and over and over again to myself. Your best work either comes in spurts or when you're working in a group, when you can kind of share the load of that energy. Now, while you may not have as much sexual energy as someone with a defined sacral center, that doesn't mean that you're whack in the bedroom, okay? It just means that if you get with the right partner, especially if you get one with a defined sacral center, things can be magnified because remember, you're mirroring that energy.
So I'll just say, we talked already about how Jen is a manifester, meaning her sacral is undefined. And I'm a manifesting generator, meaning my sacral is defined. I think it's pretty obvious to the listeners when I'm always flirting with you on the podcast, how that sacral response is coming out. And you're always like, oh, laugh it off, because you undefined.
Can we talk about how hard you said defined? You're like, and my sacral center is defined.
I mean, it is with a capital D. I'm just saying.
One thing I want to say before we leave the sacral center, for the undefined sacrals, a big way that you can feel this conditioning, and maybe I was even projecting a little bit in the breathwork before I even got to this point, is never feeling like you're doing enough and not knowing when enough is enough. You'll continue to push yourself. I do this. I've done this at work. I'm trying not to do this anymore. I don't do this anymore. I'm going to put that out there. But saying oh, I'm just going to finish this, or I'm just going to do this real quick, or I'm just going to send this one more email. And it's more so about being thoughtful and putting boundaries on yourself, because energetically, in your body, it'll continue to go until it just collapses. So being you know what? I'm not going to work after dinner. I'm not going to I have a limit on how many errands I run. I only like to run 3 errands. Mik likes to run 10 errands in a day, and he feels so energized when he gets back. He's like, I went to the cleaners, and I dropped off some clothes at the donation place. I went to the grocery store, and I'm like, that was too many. I can only park in 2, maybe 3 parking lots before I need to go home.
Yeah, it's very true. I try to map out how I can get as many errands done in as short amount of time as possible.
I just keep thinking about, so now we have a new joke where I'm like, there's this TikTok sound. So now I keep thinking about that TikTok sound with Nicki Minaj. It's that Nicki Minaj track. It's just it's just, and the people are running all around crazy. That's you. That's not me. I can't do that.
I'm not running around crazy. That's how you feel.
That's how I perceive you.
Oh, okay. I feel fine.
I'm couldn't be me.
I'm cooling.
Anyways, moving on.
Next up, we have the Solar Plexus Center, also known as the Emotion Center. It's a triangle to the right of the sacral center on your chart, and it's where our emotions are housed. Those with a defined solar plexus feel the entirety of emotional waves, the highs and the lows. Their feelings may not be permanent for long, and they shouldn't make big decisions in the heat of the moment. Rather, they should feel the intense emotions, get objective about what they're experiencing, and then proceed with their choice when things have calmed down. Your emotions are also contagious, and you can change the whole vibe of those in your vicinity. Your job is to be cognizant of how you experience emotion and how you also affect others. For those with an undefined solar plexus, your normal state is cool, calm, and collected, especially when you're alone. But when you get around others, you can get caught up in the emotional waves of others. Now you're crying because everyone else is crying.
I think that the beauty of this design is it's statistically 50-50. So you have 50% of the population are defined and 50% are undefined, which is pretty cool. So basically, we're not all robots, and we're not all, I don't want to say dramatic, but we're not all, caught up in emotions taking me over. Shout out to Destiny's Child. But I remember telling one of my friends that I wasn't a big crier until I became her friend, because I really am not. I have an undefined solar plexus. But now I'm pretty certain that she has a defined solar plexus. I need to run her chart. And I think I was riding her emotional wave with her. Like, I was getting swept up in it. But when I objectively watched her emotions, I'd be like, huh, that's how that made you feel.
So I think the better example is actually our daughter. So you and I both have undefined emotional centers.
Yes.
And our oldest has a defined emotional center.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just in the course of day-to-day being in the house with her, we both get swept up in her emotional waves, which at times can be very irrational, given
that she's 3.
Exactly. But I find her pulling us in much the same way that, you talk about your friend.
That is true. Because when she's happy, it is very contagious. And I think sometimes you can write that off as just like, oh, that's your kid. But it's like, no, we watch it every day. And it's like, we're like, what happened? My Band-Aid fell off. And you're just like, what?
Yeah.
And so now you're all stressed and angsty. And then she's like, oh, never mind. I found it. I want goldfish. And you're just like, wait, what?
How did we get... we're over that now? Okay. All right. Ride the wave.
We will feel that whiplash with her for sure. I'm hoping that wave, starts to stretch out a little bit as she gains some emotional maturity.
Yeah.
Moving over to the left of the Sacral Center, we're getting into the spleen, which I consider to be one of the more mysterious energy centers. It's shaped like a triangle, and it's all about instinct and intuition. I think the reason why it can be the hardest to wrap your arms around, in my opinion, is because we have evolved into creatures that think with our heads and not with our instincts. So the spleen is very quiet. It's where all of our fears are also kept. It's where, we get our alarms and, that tingly, spidey sense. That's all in the spleen. A big part of the spiritual work that Mik and I have done on our spiritual journeys has been getting back in tune with this part of ourself. I think it's probably one of the biggest benefits of meditation, that practice of quieting down your mind, because I think our intuition is always trying to tell us what we need to know. But if we're so used to our brain just going until we collapse and go to sleep for the night, then we're missing out on those messages. If you have a defined spleen, you're spontaneous, you're highly intuitive. You can walk into a restaurant or a house and just sense that something's off. And your spidey sense is going all the time. So you can come off a little bit paranoid and maybe a bit nervous. The lesson, though, is to stay alert, but don't let this keep you from living your life. And if you have an undefined spleen, your fears aren't necessarily your intuition whispering to you, but rather you mirroring the fears of others. So I'd probably think of that as more so like, I read this story and this person walked into a Target and the automatic door hit them and they died. And then I was also on Twitter and I saw that someone said that their great grandma, something freaked out at her house and it caught on fire. And so you're thinking about things that may have happened to other people and what if, and I heard this, and you're extrapolating it to that. Versus, I think with the defined spleen, it's don't go that way. Don't take that exit today. You know what? The vibe's off in this place. Maybe you should leave. I think it's a little bit more quiet and a little bit more from maybe higher dimensions versus the conditioning that you can get from others with the undefined spleen. Is it's coming in from the outside. So again, you're trying to get objective. Maybe perceive oh, yes, that is a worst case scenario. I could prepare for it. I could worry about it. I could, you're trying to get a little bit more perspective. Those with the undefined spleen can also be highly psychic because they're also picking up on the undercurrent of what's going on with others too, which I think that work then, if you're picking up on fears, you also kind of have to dice and figure out what's what. What's yours, what's not yours, which is a common theme with undefined energy centers. But a lot of mediums and psychics have undefined spleens.
Interesting. So my mind went to, like, medically, biologically, there's a lot of folks who don't have a spleen, right? It gets removed for various reasons. And so I'm just like, how does that affect their intuition or like intuitive abilities if like biologically they don't have a spleen?
Yeah, I think, and I actually knew someone who had some medical issues and they had their spleen removed. And I did my Googles. I was like, what is a spleen and what is it for? And they were like, oh, we don't know. It's not really necessary. Like the way they think about our appendix, which is really, really fascinating to me because we've talked about this before, that I personally think it's very arrogant that we think we know everything about the human body or the planet Earth. Yeah. And what if you need that?
Yeah.
It's just because it's not necessarily pumping this in and pumping that out and processing this or digesting that does not mean that it's superfluous.
Yeah. I mean, I would like to think that nature is efficient and that when you have grown two humans inside of you, there was not wasted energy to make organs that they didn't need.
Okay. Because I was tired. So I don't know. There is one account that I follow on Instagram, and I'll drop that in the show notes. She only talks about manifestors because I'm a manifestor, so I follow her. And she grew up with a lot of conditioning, a ton of conditioning, like probably a rough childhood. And she had this weird autoimmune disease that it actually affected her spleen.
Oh, wow.
And she's a splenic manifestor. And we'll get a little bit into that, but like she depends on her spleen to tell her how to make decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And when she started living, like coming out of that conditioning, and then I think even further after she discovered human design and like really started experimenting with like how to navigate her life, it all went away.
Interesting.
So that was actually something that I hadn't said in this episode. We hadn't really touched on it, but if you hear about some of the conditioning that you can take on in your undefined centers, you might want to key in on, am I also manifesting some of these things physically?
Mm-hmm.
Like for a crown or a mind, do I often struggle with headaches?
Yeah.
So that can also pop up too. So that's also a good thing to key in on. And we talk about that a little bit, about how the spiritual can manifest in the physical. So
absolutely.
Food for thought for sure.
Last but not least, we have the root center. It's at the very bottom of the chart in the shape of a square. It houses our adrenaline and how we process stress. We've talked previously about how if you have a defined sacral, you have this source of energy. Well, if you also have a defined root, this energy center gives you the compulsion to act. You, as a defined root, you light the fuse for others. You get people and projects launched, and you're great under pressure. However, when things are calm, you may struggle to stay still. A theme we've seen with defined centers is that with great power comes great responsibility. So you want to make sure you're harnessing this energy of the root for what you've thoughtfully chosen to engage with. On the other hand, if your root is undefined, your natural state is to be relaxed and unbothered. The problem comes when you get sucked into the stresses of others. You may find yourself getting worked up when others impose their deadlines onto you, but you have to remember that their needs and pressures are not necessarily your pressures. Because you don't have that internal pressure, you may be a serial procrastinator who needs the pressure of the deadline to build up before you can get something done. You may also struggle with punctuality if you're on someone else's schedule.
And boy, oh boy, is that my issue. I have an undefined root. And what's funny is hearing what Mik was saying, a little mantra that I used to say to myself when I was working is, your poor planning is not my emergency. I used to get so pissed off when people were like, I need this. I was like, well, I was over here chilling And you should have known that you needed that 2 whole weeks ago. So your poor planning is not my emergency. I find the Outlook chime to be intrusive and disruptive. I have turned it all the way off. Oh, I have a huge problem with artificial deadlines. That will put me in a rage. And deadlines that just don't make sense, I guess. I tend to, if I am asked to do something, I tend to create my own deadline. Either it's going to be earlier or it might be later. So maybe that's, you know what? Maybe you should honor my human design and stop trying to impose your schedules on me with your time stamps. And you're stressing me out as someone with an undefined root. And I would just hope that you see me and stop trying to indict me and throw me in tardy jail.
As someone with a defined root, I would hope you'd honor my human design and get ready on time. We're trying to go somewhere.
Well, it sounds like we're in an impasse. So there you have it.
And that, folks, is human design marriage.
It's so fun. I love human design. It's so fun. This was a really good exercise for both of us. I haven't looked at our charts that closely in a while.
Yeah.
So it was actually really fun putting this all together for you guys. I hope you really enjoyed it. If you want to read more about human design, I've really been enjoying the book Human Design, easy title, by Shaitan Parkin. I'll also drop a couple of blogs, podcasts, IG accounts that I've really enjoyed as I've jumped into the deep end of human design. And we're still only scratching the surface. If you get your chart, and I hope you're enjoying the podcast, and I'm sure we'll have more human design episodes to come, you can also always get a formal reading, which we haven't really talked about. Like, there are people who will read your chart and really put together this full picture, and they'll do the deep diving to kind of synthesize what it is that makes you tick.
Absolutely.
Something also that's been going around, I think it's been kind of going around the tech companies, is corporations have been doing human design readings for teams so they can better understand each other and how they all work together, which I think is really, really cool. So that's how I feel about that.
Yeah. I think once you kind of get into human design, it can snowball. You want to run everyone's chart around you. People will get tired of you asking them for the birth time. That's happened a couple times with me. And I think ultimately, though, it's just a great tool to help us better understand each other and our kids. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoy diving into your energy centers and going back and looking at your energy type and how that all interacts with each other. We're going to do some more human design episodes. We're trying to figure out the sequencing and how we're going to do that, but we definitely want to have more to talk about other aspects of the chart. So stay tuned for that.
Mik has challenged me to say this on the podcast. But if you have your chart and you have questions...
Speak up. They want to hear you.
If you have your chart and you have questions and you would like to send them to me, I will take a look at it.
Let's say it like this. We are looking for one person to send Jenn their birth, time, place, and date. And we are going to call out some specific things about that chart on a future episode.
Okay, I like that. That's a little bit more controlled. And that'll be fun to do.
All right, guys.
As always, if you have a question, please email us at chakrasandshotguns@gmail.com. That's also where you can send your human design charts if you so choose. You can also find us on Instagram and YouTube. If you'd like to join our Chakras and Shotguns community, you can support us on Patreon. It's super fun. And finally, if you're loving the show, please subscribe and give us 5 stars wherever you listen.
Thanks. Namaste.